tēnā tātou katoa, tēnei te mihi, he mihi nui, he mihi mahana e a koutou. Kia ora mō tō tautoko o te kaupapa nei. He kaupapa tapu, he kaupapa o tino mana a kia mātou. Hoi anō, ko Timothy Giles au he mātua Pākehā o he wahine Māori. Nei, me taku kōtiro, ko Diva no Ngāti Whātua, tōna iwi Ngāti Whātua Kaipara. So my name's Timothy, and I am here primarily as a prop for this one, and also as the guilty party for much of what she's going to tell you. So you might be nervous, but imagine how uncomfortable I am. My stories around concussion and brain injury, prior to my brain injury, I worked a lot in media, so they're pretty available. And because I didn't learn from my first concussion, I've explored the experience repeatedly. And in the most recent time, I did a podcast when I was quite unwell during lockdown, which Headway Michelle and Stacey have seen promote, and Michelle produced and really partnered me on and made possible. So in the unlikely event that you want to hear anything I've got to say, that's available. My daughter, however, has not told her story as an adult.
Kia ora, ko Diva tōku ingoa. That's my dad. Bit nervous. Cool, okay. So I'm blessed to have two wonderful parents, and I share my mum with two older siblings. Quite soon after I was born, my mum returned to work, and Dad became my primary caregiver, staying at home with me. So from 6 weeks old, we spent most days just the two of us. When I was a toddler, my parents separated, but remaining exceptional co-parents. My dad was at every dance show, volunteering at all school events, staying on noho marae, singing at the top of his lungs during all the waiata. He always had snacks on hand. He knew all my friends' names and their parents' names too. He was engaging, fun and silly. Burned in my memory is Dad strutting down the street to Mum and I at the cafe, waving and yelling my name, all the while wearing my tiny miniskirt. Some would consider him funny. I personally lean towards embarrassing. Dad was great at lounge dance parties, whether it was Hilary Duff, The Foundations, or Paul Kelly, we would belt it all. He told imaginative stories and was always up for a good jump on the bed and midnight cuddles when I had a nightmare. He was a terrible baker, but always gave it a go, Anzac biscuits being his worst attempt. My dad was patient with me. He was understanding and tolerant. I've never had many talents, but Dad has always been my biggest cheerleader, my loudest advocate, and a very important confidant. Mum loves to remind me how she once said, "Diva, you're Mummy's little princess." And as the recently speaking toddler that I was, I quickly corrected her, "No, Mummy, I'm Daddy's little princess." He was my best friend. I wanted to share this with you for context, because context is vital. Behind clinical notes are people with full lives, full of beautiful, wonderful, challenging, devastating and complex lives, and that must be at the forefront of every interaction and every decision that you as clinicians and people of influence in their lives make. So go beyond your clinical notes, beyond your research, beyond your understanding of brain injury, and see the person and their whānau. When you meet my dad on a good day, you'll see all of what I mentioned, because he puts in a lot of energy in desperately trying to not cause a problem. When he's slept and eaten, when he's calm, and on those good days, you'll really like my dad. Everyone does. 20 years ago, when I was 8, I lost that version of my dad to a brain injury. My mum lost her co-parent, and my dad lost his stability. So he's a bit different now. He's still funny, kind, vivacious, hugely intellectual, and he's still completely embarrassing most of the time. But he's tired now. He started being excessively late to pick me up if he remembered to at all. He feels deep sadness. He's irritable, quick to lose his temper. He struggles to regulate himself. He can be inappropriate, say the wrong thing, and his filter is often way off. He can't recall your name or the memories of our life, and most days he can't get through the day without a nap. This used to be 2 naps, before that 3, 4, even 5. Times change. Some years have been better than others, and all years have been hard. That's what hasn't changed. As a kid, I felt abandoned and like it was all my fault. My story isn't a particularly remarkable one, but while writing this, I've come to realise that that's why it's so important. It's a story that many people share and many more will come to experience themselves. I'm really lucky, and I know that now. It could have been a lot worse. But that 8-year-old girl whose life changed couldn't comprehend that at the time, and she just needed her dad. So what's it like to grow up with a brain-injured parent in a medical system that so often misses the mark? When my mum lost her co-parent, she became a single mother. It would have been far easier for her to do it alone. She could have said, "This man can't parent with me anymore, so doesn't get to participate. How can I co-parent with a man who can't take care of himself, let alone our child?" Luckily for me, she didn't do that. Mum supported my relationship with Dad. She championed it and prioritised it. But the truth is he really couldn't parent, and so that was a huge sacrifice for her. Brain injury doesn't just destabilise the brain-injured person. Brain injury destabilises the entire family. Kids seeing parents in trauma lose their steady role models and in turn become unsteady themselves. You cannot protect the child or hide what is happening. So you either choose to deny their experience or you can choose to equip them for it. Don't pretend it's fine and don't deny what they experience. Don't tell them that things will be okay because they already aren't and they won't be. No matter the injury, their parent will never be the same again. Somebody should have told that 8-year-old, don't listen to your dad. Anything he says or does, he is not a reliable source. When my primary caregiver was no longer a stable role model and my mum had to manage that, we needed clinicians and organisations to help me deal with that, and that's how you can help heal my dad, and deal with him. Kids are a great source of feedback and insight. How was he really? When you saw him, he did his best for you. He made appointments when he could cope, he rested, he went straight home, and he slept afterwards. Dad didn't mean to lie to you, but he did. You saw him at his best, and I just saw him. Do you know what kids do around their parents? They observe and interpret constantly. So ask them how things really are. Create a safe space for those kids and you'll get the truth. He changed day to day, I didn't. So you can't protect me from it. How could you equip me for it? Can you do the same as with other conditions? Mum and I needed information like it comes with a cancer diagnosis, dementia, an external injury. Here's what's going to happen, what happens to their hair, body, energy, personality, treatment. They might look okay, but stuff's going on for them in the energy, mood, mobility, random and chaotic behaviours. You can't make it okay, but you can prepare us for it. You can give us the tools to manage our parent and tools to manage our new reality. My dad had a neuropsychologist called James Cunningham, and he taught me what to do as best he could. I'd say, "Hey Dad, you're tired, you need to sleep." Or, "Dad, you're hungry, you need to eat." He taught me how to help my dad, to communicate with him, and most importantly, he taught Dad how to respond to that. I'm really good at meeting strangers. Might not seem like it, how nervous I am, one-on-one, much better. I learnt to be. I'd introduce myself to people to get their name because Dad couldn't remember who they were, people he'd known for many years. Dad got angry a lot, quickly and randomly, at me, at friends, at strangers. Tools for this, Dad knew cues, that's why James taught me about the food and the naps. So what could be other cues? A reminder for a dad whose brain in that moment is so overstimulated, he can't process the situation quickly enough to see what's happening, how to actually parent in that moment. So what about, "Dad, I'm a child, I'm overwhelmed and I can't cope." Teach kids that and teach parents how to respond to it. I have excellent attention to detail. How could I not? I had to know when the music was too loud, when the room we're in was too busy, felt too small, if Dad had eaten, if Dad had slept, if he was grumpy and he might be short with you, I'd try to lessen the blow and make it better for you. The lights are too bright, the voices in the room too high a pitch, Dad will get upset soon, let's turn the music off, the lights down, let's avoid this crowd, let's sit in a different seat in the cafe, let's divert the conversation quickly, quiet, always be quiet, and always go home. How smart are kids? It's incredible how quickly they adapt and learn. They'll do it with or without guidance, so help guide them, because you aren't really the one caring for their parent, they are. In my school, I had a friend with a disease, and she had a medical card that she'd hand to a store requesting that they let her use the toilet immediately. As I mentioned, Dad got angry at strangers sometimes, and I could have really used a card like that. Could say, "Hi, I'm sorry for this. Dad has a brain injury and he's struggling to manage the stimuli. He will be okay and you are safe." I work in hospitality, and I often see instances where this would be helpful. One night we had a family in with their father, and he looked completely fine, but he was very touchy. He was struggling to balance on the high seat, and he was a bit erratic. His family were clearly anxious and distressed at the scene that may occur if we didn't manage each step perfectly, and he was confused and anxious too. They apologetically told me he has early onset dementia, and I immediately understood. Just like my dad, things weren't as they physically appeared, so I gave him a big cuddle back. I asked another group at a short table to switch with them, and I told the family there's nothing to be sorry about. He became calm and settled, and so did his family. Acting with empathy is easy. Most of us really want to do it. Feels good, right? We just need to know how. So quick explanations help families in distress and the impacted strangers that they're facing to understand. I'm sure a card would have really helped that family, and it would have helped me too. Some days it still would. That might have helped my dad to keep his support network. As I'm sure you know, with brain injury, behaviour rapidly changes. Dad's did. He was different. His friends couldn't understand it or manage it. So along with his personality and stability, Dad lost his friends too. That left me as his support network. A child, then a teenager, and then a young adult now. Maybe still a young adult. As I wrote that, I was like, but probably still quite young. What I needed and still need is my own support network. So support me and equip me and heal my dad. So that's 8-year-old me. 20 years later, my close friend and vital part of my support network, Jo, who loves my dad as well, she told me to tell you the impacts, both on me as a kid and the impacts on me now. And I struggled to come up with that. Turns out I disassociate as a coping mechanism. So this was a lot of delving into. Jo pointed out that I'm pretty hypervigilant. I still emotionally and physically monitor Dad, even though he's a lot better than he used to be. As an example today, I'm finding it quite stressful coming in, knowing that he's been here all day and seeing his eyes and his body and how intense he's experiencing it, and it causes me to feel like I need to fix it or remove him, which is not something that I'd mentally planned for. He can now be in a room with conversation while there is music playing. He can be in a crowded space, and he can handle the light better, but not me. I get overstimulated easily. I'm sensitive to light, and I am irritated by too much noise. I struggle to regulate my feelings. I'm constantly monitoring those around me, overthinking what's going on. I'm on edge, always in fight or flight. I expect the worst, and I'm ready for it. A phone call makes my heart drop. Something bad has happened. I worry about Dad, and I catastrophize. And I'm working on it. I recently remarked to my therapist that I'm not sure why I decided to own a business when it's so stressful. She suggested that stress may be the state that I'm most comfortable in. I feel pretty overwhelmed at what my dad's life will look like as he gets older. In so many ways, he's recovered, but I think of it more as being in remission. Anything could happen, a little bang to the head, another concussion, a sickness impacting his immunity, and he will be set back. Years of recovery. It's happened a few times over the last 20 years. Dad and I have a complicated relationship, just like I'm sure many of you may with your parents. The difference is we've actively worked at it in a way that many don't, which makes us stronger. Relationship is possible when a parent is brain injured and behaves badly, when they're aggressive, moody, unreliable and unpredictable, when they're chaotic, forgetful. Kids blame themselves. Every distressing moment feels like your responsibility and your failure. But it's not all bad. I don't blame myself as much these days, and I'm getting better at recognising that it's not about me. One of the hardest parts, both then and now, has been other people's judgments. Family, friends, strangers. I have less tolerance for it now, though, and I'm better at ending conversations or even relationships when it compromises me. But it does still hurt. I'm reminded of Attitude TV, who wanted to do a piece on my dad, in his life to shine a light on the hidden side of brain injury, but upon a short investigation decided that the impact of his brain injury wasn't enough. That one definitely hurt a bit. I'm learning to have boundaries, to not take on responsibility. I'm better at communicating with those who don't understand and who project their feelings about my dad and his behaviour onto me. I'm a good friend to have during traumatic events. I'm chaotic and anxious on good days, but in your worst moments, I'll be calm and collected under pressure. Dad's ability to educate those around him is low at times, and I can take that load on now. I have a better support network. It's more than he's had over the last 20 years, and I'm very lucky. My friends don't judge, they listen, they understand, they forgive, and they love my dad. And that enables me to be a more loving and resilient daughter. 20 years later, Dad remains as my biggest cheerleader, my loudest advocate, and just as much of a confidant for me. As I finish up, I want to request that as your day ends, remember that the impact you have is immense, and before deciding, based on what you initially see, that the impact is or isn't on your patient, friend, or client, I request that you look deeper, you seek to connect further, you consider and then coach, affirm our experience, and then equip us for it. What we see is real, and it won't always be okay, and you can't change that. It will be hard, but it doesn't have to be so lonely. You can help equip us all. Tēnā rā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui.
Time for questions together.